I did not know about the overview effect before I flew in space. A really wonderful Earthling named Frank White was contemplating what it would be like for humans when they're separate from the planet, and just how impactful that would be in recognizing that everything we know and love is in this place that's designed to take care of us. When you're floating in your spaceship, having this view, this experience of our planet, you realize just how connected we all are to it. You do not have to travel off the planet to experience the overview effect. The awe and wonder of all of that is surrounding us every day.
Hello, and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, where you're going to hear from innovators around the world who will put a spring in your step again. Today, we're going to embark on a journey beyond the confines of Earth and its atmosphere with none other than astronaut Nicole Stott. She is one of the few individuals on our planet who have had the privilege of leaving the Earth and walking in space, tethered only to this reality by something akin to a simple rope and hook. Nicole has spent 104 days in space across 2 missions, one with the space shuttle and one with the International Space Station. And she has gained a unique perspective on our planet and the universe beyond that she shares with us today. She is also an artist and an author, both passions that connect this remarkable life in space and exploration she has enjoyed to our realities as ordinary people here on Earth. So join us as we lift off to the cosmos with astronaut Nicole Stott and prepare to be inspired by her insights and enjoy this as a journey ourselves. So welcome, Nicole Stott.
Thank you. That was very kind. Thank you.
Oh, I tell you, I've had the most fun diving into your background. I do hours and hours of research on all my guests. And I tell you, it made me feel like I was going to talk to a friend, somebody that might be my neighbor, and somebody who can tell us about something that 99.999% of us will never get to experience personally. So it is such an honor to be able to chat with you today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really thankful to be here.
I tell you, we've got to start with a very simple statement that you've, I think, become rather famous for. But you say, don't forget you live on a planet. This is something that I think all of us forget every day. And I think a place to start with this, don't forget we live on a planet, is with your stories from the cupola. Talk to us about the cupola.
Yeah, I love that you pick this out. It's always, to me, it tends to be like the simple things that can be the most compelling, right? And we live on a planet. That reality check is in your face when you are floating and looking out the window of the cupola. And the cupola is this module that's on the Earth-facing side of the International Space Station. It's beautiful. It's like 7 windows. It's this big circular window with 6 that kind of surround it, like a bay window almost, kind of sticking out of the bottom of the space station. And when you float in there, you get just this, this incredible horizon to horizon view of the planet. You can look to the left and right and see kind of the extent of your space station. It's just, you want to be there. And so when astronauts have free time, I can tell you that's where we are, floating around, heads bouncing off each other, just either sucking in that Earth view or, doing our best to capture what we're seeing out that window. And I think the thing that really struck me too was that view never got old. You wanted to be, you knew you were going to be surprised and in awe every time you floated in front of that window. Never got old. And I don't know, there was just something about it that pulled you in. You didn't want to leave it either, right? So I discovered, early on in my flight, I had to set my alarm to remind myself to leave that place to actually do the work I was there for.
Yes.
Yeah.
So help us imagine, talk to us, how much of the Earth are we seeing? Is the Earth a ball way out there, or are we seeing just part of it? How close are you?
We're seeing just part of it. We on the space station, we're about 300 miles above the Earth, and which in the grand scheme of things, not all that far away, right? But you feel like you're far. It provides you. I mean, you're this vantage point, this extraordinary vantage point that just feels so totally different to anything else that I've ever experienced. But we're 300 miles up, so we get kind of this. I don't, my some of my colleagues could give you probably the exact angle of what you're seeing, horizon to horizon. But there is no denying it's a planet below you, no denying. Whereas, we go to the moon and that's a quarter million, that's 1,000 times further, right? So from the moon, you get that whole sphere of Earth, but I don't think you need the whole sphere to appreciate this whole planet thing.
Well, and that leads us to we're going to talk about this book that Nicole's written. I'm going to hold it up. It's so great, but it's called Back to Earth: What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet and Our Mission to Protect It.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's just full of so many references to things where you think about your own world. One of the things I noticed about Nicole is that space is local to her. Like I always am saying that everything starts local. Like every person I've ever interviewed for this podcast started at a problem they could see locally, and now space is your local.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm going to recommend the book to people, because it will, about every page I had something I was annotating about that made me think about something in my life. So we're going to talk about this book, but talk about something you mentioned, the book called Earth Gazing.
I think as humans, we want to, I don't know, maintain a connection to the things that are important to us, right? To the things that have significance. And when you're floating in your spaceship, having this view, this experience of our planet, you realize just how connected we all are to it. And I think about that, like, here I'm in this place that's, maybe I'd like to think I could go further in space one day, maybe the moon or something. But I'm in this place that's the farthest I've ever been from Earth, and I'm looking back and feeling more connected to it at that time than I had remembered acknowledging or feeling connected to it when my feet were on it. And you want to experience that place. You want to look at it and be like, I mean, I remember describing to my son, who was 7 when I flew to space the first time. I'm like, oh my gosh, Roman, it's like you're looking at the brightest light bulb you've ever imagined, and you've splattered it with all the colors that you know Earth to be. And then you kind of have to turn your head away a little bit when you turn it on, because your eyes are going to have to get adjusted to this translucent, iridescent, glowing, colorful light bulb against the blackest black you've ever seen. And you want to gaze upon that. You want to spend time just immersed, transcending that, that with that whole experience.
And that is that a nice way to segue into this thing called the overview effect? Talk to us about the overview effect, because I am always surprised at the number of people who have never heard of the overview effect. Talk to us about that.
I love the overview. I mean, I did not know about the overview effect before I flew in space. I mean, I had talked to my colleagues about what they experienced, because you knew that's going to be this extraordinary thing to experience Earth that way. Just like your vacation pictures, that they're not going to do it justice, your pictures and videos or the videos you've seen and that kind of thing. So you're trying to prepare yourself, mentally, I think, for what that's going to be. And but the overview effect, though, a really wonderful Earthling named Frank White coined this term. I like to think of him; he's like a space philosopher, really. One of the most thoughtful, humble people you will ever meet. Was contemplating what it would be like for humans when they're separate from the planet, when they're experiencing it from a spaceship or the moon, or out in space somewhere, and just how impactful that would be in acknowledging you live on a planet, right? And recognizing that everything we know and love is in this place, that it's designed to take care of us. And the interconnectivity, that local thing you mentioned, Linda, I think it's huge in all of this, is that, and my husband likes to say global is the new local, right? This idea of being on a planet that's our local, that's our neighborhood. And the overview effect is all about that. And then it's even more importantly, I think, and Frank will tell you this too, it's like you've got to suck in that experience and let it get into your heart and your mind. And then you got to think, okay, what can I do? What's the action I need to take to ensure that this perspective can be appreciated and perhaps even experienced by more and more of us. And so just a really beautiful thing. And I think, you mentioned this idea of a lot of people not knowing what the overview effect is, having heard of that. I think the thing that frustrates me more is people who espouse the overview effect but don't know who Frank is. And the wonder of this human that has shared this with us. People need to know about Frank, and I cannot wait till Frank is in space, experiencing that himself. And then Frank, I'm going to interrupt you because Frank would say, and it's what I think most astronauts want people to understand too, is that you do not have to travel off the planet. You do not have to be on a spaceship. You do not have to go to the moon to experience the overview effect. It's right. The awe and wonder of all of that is surrounding us every day.
Absolutely. I think it was a wonderful mutual friend of ours named Mary Liz Bender,
Yep.
who, gosh, we could
Yeah,
go
we
on
could
with
talk
her
all day
life
about
story.
Mary Liz too.
So I'll say here that the show notes on the Goodness Exchange website, where the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast is located, will be extensive. You won't find that on Spotify or Apple Tunes, but we will make sure the show notes over on the Goodness Exchange at the podcast will contain every single reference that you hear. And I can already tell Nicole and I are going to give you all kinds of places to go next. But there is an article written by this woman named Mary Liz Bender, and she was then living in her van, a fan of rocketry, her and her boyfriend. And after she published an article on the Goodness Exchange, Frank White actually called her up. He was everything to her, this notion of the overview effect. And so her life has changed completely, and
Yep.
that's how come Nicole and I both know Mary Liz. But the reason why I bring that up is because that's the way it goes. When you see your passion and you follow it and it becomes local to you, that's
Yep.
the way it goes. You meet your mentor. You know, life just sort of unfolds like that for you. I know that people are all into this thing called manifestation and stuff, but I just think it comes back to something Pascal said years ago, is that chance favors the prepared mind.
Love it. Love it. And I
Right?
know, Linda, you speak a lot about curiosity, right? And
Yeah.
how impactful that can be and how just positively influential that can be. And it's one of the things, I mean, not just young kids, but, students at universities or even young professionals and even some of like old people like me. I'm like, that curiosity, just like you were saying, that discovering your local, that curiosity, when I look back on my life, that opened up more opportunities for me, opened up more possibilities through the people I was being introduced to, through the Frank Whites along the way that were there, like willing just to lift me up in that curiosity. And I wouldn't be sitting here with you without that. I know that for a fact. Yeah.
So, gosh, there's so many places we have to go from this exact point in our conversation. So, I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and we're going to talk about more about the overview effect. We're going to talk about how it actually works on the space station, where we get up in the morning and are concerned about. We're
Yep.
going to, we've got so many things. The earthing habit that you've got, that really, really is something. Okay, let's take a break. You know how the constant negative noise in our digital lives feels like it's reaching a boiling point? Now, many of us have tuned out the news and social media almost entirely. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. There are newsworthy stories about amazing progress, innovation, leaps in human potential, and wonders in the natural world, and they're just not reaching the top of our feeds. We can have access to this, but none of us has the time or maybe even the emotional stamina to search through all the doom and gloom news to find what's right with the world. Okay, enter the Goodness Exchange. There, we are giving instant access to positive news for curious people. Did you hear about the recent Harvard study that found that exposure to just 4 minutes of good news can make you 32% less anxious and 18% more optimistic? Well, I don't know about you, but I need those kind of numbers in my life. So, if you want to live with more joy and way less fear, it's really simple. First, you join us at the Goodness Exchange. Everyone around the world has the opportunity to access this kind of content. And we've promised no politics for about a decade, so you're safe from all that distraction as well. Second, you allow this new, more positive, balanced worldview to put a spring in your step again. It can change the way you react to your kids, your coworkers, everybody you come in contact with. And the stories we write about can make you the idea person in your circles. These challenging times call for us to wake up and take control of our perspective. The people who use the Goodness Exchange have the ability to react to the harshness of the world much different because they know way more about what's right with the world. And that's a resource. So subscribe to the Goodness Exchange, our YouTube channel and the podcast, and use this content to live a more expansive worldview. It is still an amazing world out there, and you can be a part of it. Welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness. Okay, we're back with astronaut Nicole Stott. Nicole is an artist. She's an author. She's I think, a translator of this thing called the overview effect of and a translator of the best kind. Let's finish up on that topic because I think that what I take away from the overview effect in Frank White's work was that a lot of astronauts end up coming back to Earth changed, like really transformed. If they had an artistic bone in their body, somehow that is going to come out. If they had a spiritual bent or a philosophical bent, I mean, this overview effect is transformational, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's the big thing about it, and it's why we want people to understand that you don't have to travel to space to experience too. I think in the end, it's very much this welcoming, this opening yourself up, and I always say like your heart and mind because I think it involves both, to the awesomeness, to the wonder that surrounds us, and we can get buried, I think, with our blinders and not be looking for that every day. And, I mean, I think you could go to space and keep the windows shutters closed on the cupola and do your entire mission without looking out at Earth. It would not be the experience you want it to be. But you have to open yourself up, just like you have to open those shutters up. You have to open yourself up to that awe and wonder and the impact it can have on you. And, we talked at the very beginning about, we live on a planet. That was the thing to me. It's like, this reality check of what we know when we're in kindergarten, right? We all know we live on a planet, but to be able to bring that into your daily consciousness, there's not a day goes by now where I don't wake up and my feet hit the floor and I'm like, I'm on a planet. I'm spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. I'm traveling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. Now, how am I going to use that? And we're all earthlings, and only border that matters, that thin blue line. And how important it is for us to behave like crewmates and not passengers here on Spaceship Earth. And all of that comes out through what Frank is saying with this philosophy of the overview effect, through, even though it might be said in a little bit different way, through all of the interviews he's done with so many astronauts about their own experience. Even if they wouldn't say, oh, I experienced the overview effect, you start talking to them and it all starts coming out in the same way. And I think it is a spiritual thing. It's because I mean, spiritual to me is all about how are we, relating more than our physical to what is all around us.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that brings me to a question. I phoned my sister, who's an incredibly brilliant person, well read. My God, that woman reads, and she's worldly, and she's raising two college kids now. And I said, Betsy, if you were going to ask an astronaut anything, what would it be? And she said she wanted to know just right about that. She said, "Did you become less spiritual or more spiritual? And what does spiritual mean to you anyway?"
Yeah. Well, I would have to say that I went to space. I mean, I am a person of faith. I believe in God. And I think there should be we could talk all day about this too, but we won't. No conflict between science and religion. There absolutely shouldn't be. And but I went to space with that already, right? And I think that helped me in a way, like look at the awesomeness, look at the wonder, and pull it in to myself. And then I that's a part of spirituality to me for sure. But I think spirituality is a much bigger thing. It's about the who and where we are in space together. It's about our place with respect to what we consider local, how we're going to be a part of that. It really, and I can say for sure that that was uplifted in me. I brought a lot more of that back to Earth than I probably took to space with me. Yeah.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Okay, so let's get to some mechanics that actually connect to this comment you made about Spaceship Earth. I will also turn people on to another episode on the Goodness Exchange, besides the one with Mary Liz. Another one was with an amazing woman who I also met at this conference where I met you. I do want to put a good pitch in for the Sea Change Conference. It's an innovation conference in Burlington, Vermont, twice a year. And that's where I actually met and spoke to Nicole at some length. And another person I met at that same conference is called Brandy Parker. She's a sort of a materials scientist, innovator, consultant who is talking about the materials of the future. And she and I couldn't figure out how to make that interesting for everyone
So it
because
is
it
very
is
cool. It is very cool.
so cool, but I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to make it. And luckily, she and I stumbled upon this notion of Spaceship Earth. And she knew exactly what year that, I think it's 1967 when someone first quoted that term and started talking about it. And then we couched everything that we talked about in that episode with this concept of Spaceship Earth. So to get there, I want to turn people on to this amazing talk that you had that's online. We'll put the link to it at St. Petersburg College. It's you want to curl up with something that'll make you
Aw.
feel a spring in your step and a lot more uplifted than an hour and a half on Facebook, whatever. It's this or this talk that you gave at St. Petersburg College. Okay. So there are two parts. I couldn't possibly cover the whole thing, but there's two parts I do want to ask you about. So there's this part in the talk where you start telling us about what the first minutes are of the day on the International Space Station, how it starts by checking your life support systems.
Yep.
And the crossover on what we have to be concerned about on Spaceship Earth was unmistakable. So talk to us about how the day starts in these cross-checking of systems and how that slides into our Spaceship Earth concept.
No, I love it because, so this, to lead into that, I wrote this book, right, Back to Earth. And I never wanted to write the, like, here's how Nicole became an astronaut book. I mean, I love reading that about my colleagues, but for me, it was like, there's that, I didn't feel like that was the real message, right? The important thing. And so the book is really it's all about the ways we somehow have managed to live peacefully and successfully on this machine in space that are just a wonderful example for what we should be doing down here on Spaceship Earth, on our planetary spaceship. And so, we build this machine, right, to mimic. I mean, the first things we're doing to mimic as best we can what Earth does for us naturally. And we know we have to do that just to survive and not to have the warm, fleshy ones and to do any science, any of it, but we have to be able to survive there. And so every morning we wake up, you do the usual, go to the bathroom and brush your teeth and, have your breakfast and your bag of coffee. But one of the very first things is we check how much carbon dioxide's in our atmosphere. We check how much clean drinking water we have. We check on the integrity of that thin metal hull of the spaceship. And we absolutely are checking on the health and well-being of all of our crewmates. And we do that because we know we have to survive in that place. And then we can go on and do the science and the engineering and the work of the day in that place. It's extraordinary.
And it is just too easy to apply that to what we should be doing right here on Spaceship Earth every day.
Yeah.
Checking the CO2 levels, checking the safe drinking water amount, checking, like that is the ultimate connection between what you're experiencing up there. But there's one part of where we started today about the cupola that I forgot to ask you about that applies here. You just mentioned the thin metal hull.
Yeah.
So that thin blue line that you will run across if you read or listen to anything about space and astronauts, they will mention the thin blue line. Carl Sagan used to mention the thin blue line. Talk
Hmm.
to us about the thin blue line and the analogy with the spaceship hull.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'm looking out my window right now. Very fortunate. It's a clear sky today, gorgeous. and it's just all blue. There's not even a cloud in the sky. And I look up, and I still even do it to today, and I'm like, man, that just looks like it goes on forever. And it's just there doing its job for us. I never really, I never really thought about the job it's doing for us, right? And yet I know now through that view out the window, and we can know from the pictures, that have been taken from space back even before people were going to it, that blue that looks like it goes on forever is this veil thin blue line that wraps around us. And just like the metal hull of our spaceship, this thin metal hull of our
It's
spaceship,
very thin. I
it's
don't
super
think that
thin.
people
It's super
realize
thin.
that.
I'm like doing like
Yeah.
this because that's how thin it is. That is what is protecting all of us from the deadly vacuum of space. If you're on the machine, it's the metal thin line. If you're down here on our planetary spaceship, it's the thin blue line of our atmosphere. And it absolutely, what became crystal clear to me, in addition to the we live on a planet and we're all earthlings, is that thin blue line is the only border that matters, right? It's the common, it's for all of us what's in common.
And we've known this for a while. I mean,
Oh,
we
yeah,
don't even have time to go into the closing of the ozone hole,
yeah.
hole in the ozone layer, but we're about the same age. And, people do not know that we have already done big things together. Like, what was it? Maybe the 70s, Nicole, 80s,
Mm-hmm.
when we realized there was this growing hole in the ozone layer and it was definitely lights out for humanity and pretty much life on Earth if it grew much bigger. And as a
Yep.
planet, we came together and we are closing, if not, I'm not sure, but almost the ozone layer is healed itself. So we are capable of this mentality of getting each other, having each other's back and just working together to solve a big problem. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I mean, to me, that it gets to the, where we check on our CO2, our water, the whole, how, the health and well being of each of us. But what that describes is behaving like a crewmate and not a passenger. It's the total difference. I mean, it seems, yeah, crewmate, passenger, wow, but it is huge. We need to accept that role. That's what the overview effect is about too. Is like, okay, accept your role as a crewmate and find out where your little things and your big things are that you can be doing that is going to improve life for you and for all life around you. And again, it just seems so simple, like, oh, I should just behave like a crewmate. Well, it's a big deal.
It is a big
And
deal.
it absolutely is. I think it's key to the way we can just do those things like you talked about, whether it's a hole in the ozone layer or carbon dioxide in our atmosphere or plastic in the ocean or whatever it might be. Distress in your neighborhood for some reason. I mean, by rallying as crewmates, it's amazing
Well,
what we
that
can do.
that reminds me of the second thing that
Yeah.
I just loved in that talk at St. Petersburg College. There is this moment where you show this picture in the talk of your whole entire crew floating in space as you would, and everybody is wearing a big red clown nose. And you talk about this everybody's a crewmate thing and how that went with Guy La Liberté. He's the people might know that he's the founder of Cirque du Soleil. So you can only imagine the idea person that you had right there with you. And Guy has the finances to be a part of this. What would you call it? A commercial part of supporting the space. To
Yeah.
people
So
with enough money can become crew.
yeah, if you got 40, $50 million, you can buy a seat on a rocket and go spend some time on the space station. And he did that through the Russian program and spent about 10 days with us on the International Space Station. And it was awesome having him there. I mean, definitely a person that at some point thought I would like to go to space, for whatever reason. I'm willing to fund it. But it was really cool to me to see how it wasn't just, I want to go spend 10 days in space. He had total purpose in what he was doing there. And he was on this mission about water, right? And has an organization called One Drop where it's educates, about access to clean drinking water or the lack of that. And then actually works to provide clean drinking water to places that didn't have it, using some of the technology we have in space to provide us with clean drinking water. But that picture, I love that picture because I look at it and I see the personality of every single one of the people that I was flying in space with. There's 9 of us in that picture at the time, and you see the joy. I think you see the excitement about being there. And I think the best people, it represents the kind of the best people you want to be with, whatever team or crew you're on, work you're doing. It's like you should be having a good time. You should be enjoying yourself as you're doing important things, right? And you could tell in that picture that we enjoyed ourselves. And then at the same time, even though there's smiles and clown noses and we're floating in all different kinds of directions, I look into the eyes of every single one of those people, and I know, I trusted that when things didn't go as planned, when it was hitting the fan and the alarm's going off at 3 o'clock in the morning and we're all floating out of our crew compartments, I trusted that every single one of those people was going to have my back. And I know they trusted I would have theirs. And that, I mean, that personality and that professionalism, that have your back kind of thing, that's the best kind of crew you can be a part of.
And that's how we've got to think about our life on this
Absolutely.
planet. Back to the
Yeah.
Spaceship Earth analogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's got to be
Buckminster
like that.
Fuller, back in the 60s, Buck it might have even been 50s, I don't know. And there was some, explorer way before that who coined the term, and that I can't remember and should. But that idea is so simple, isn't it? Like this is our spaceship. And the sad thing is it's almost like parenthood. You don't get the operating manual, right? It's like, you need, and we're all having to figure it out, and believe or not believe and whatever. But we all need to find that role as a crewmate. Yeah.
I have to throw in something that I discovered. I've been at this trying to do good news with no politics and no commercial agenda for 10 years now, more than 10 years. And that's been a fundamental thing at the Goodness Exchange all this time, is that we were going to have no agenda, just shine a light on what's right
Yep.
with the world. And one of the things I learned very early about all the people we wrote about and the people I interviewed was that they have reason to have contempt for the world, or they wouldn't be trying to solve the big problems they're trying to solve, right? But instead of being contemptful, they change contempt to curiosity. It's just the way they do it. And I've been harping on changing contempt to curiosity. If people listening haven't heard me say it, that would be a miracle. Talk to me about what you see in that phrase when you consider the overview effect and what you know about our small little fragile thin blue line that we're messing with. Talk to us about contempt to curiosity. What does has curiosity meant to you?
I think it's just so like pivotal in the way we can look at things, the way we can solve problems. I think about the early days as an engineer with NASA, and had really wonderful mentors with that. And one of the things that we were taught as young engineers was you need to believe there is a solution. A solution exists to every challenging problem. You need to go in with that attitude. And then, on top of that, you need to be operating with this philosophy, this approach that of here's how we can, not why we can't. And I mean, it's like I've got it right here. My little astronaut that has the here's how we can, not why we can't motto on it, that I've had ever since I heard that from my dear friend and mentor, Jay Honeycutt. It's been on my desk because it just shifts the way you can bring solutions to life. And that is the exact thing. If we get so buried in contempt, or we get so buried in superficially understanding something and wanting to argue it without substance, we don't get anywhere. But if we come at it curious and believing there's a solution and approaching it in a here's how we can, not we can't way, oh my gosh, the solutions just come to life and people want to join you and take part in solving that problem, whatever it might be. Some simple thing or greatest planetary challenge we have can be overcome that way.
And it's this moment. It's so critical that we recognize this moment when we're in a state of contempt.
Yep.
I saw you at your absolute best at this at this
Namaste.
innovation. Yes, I saw you at your absolute best at this innovation summit, where it seemed to me you Nicole gave a short talk, and then you were able to choose different. I don't know if they're like little little seminar sections, maybe 45 minutes to an hour long. And Nicole gave 3 of those. And at the first one, the talk at the whole event became after yours, that there were a whole lot of people that came to your first seminar with a lot of contempt about whether we should spend money in space and energies in space, or whether we should save that money and apply it to all the problems here on Earth. And it got contemptuous. And I had this feeling that, wow, did enough people go to your first seminar with curiosity in their mind, or with contempt? Like, gosh, it's really all about where we start, and if we have the
Yeah.
self-awareness to pull up and say, wait, how can I be curious in this moment? Talk to us about the gripe that seemed to be in the room. That first one, it cleared, the air cleared, and it was the next two that I went to
Yeah.
were amazing. But just to talk to us about that, because that may be what some people listening to this piece think. They think that we can oversimplify this and say money has to go here or it has to go there. But talk to us about what we should be appreciating about what space is teaching us, and how
Yeah.
that affects a lot of poor people on the planet, a lot of the innovation, a lot of the reading of the environment that we're getting. Talk to us about why we should spend money in space.
Well, and I will tell you that, this whole like pathway along to does Nikki want to be an astronaut kind of thing. The ultimate, the adventure part of it is awesome, right? Flying on a rocket ship, launch into space, all of that. I highly recommend it. It's incredible. But if that had been all it was about, I would not have filled out the application to be an astronaut. The thing that made it what I wanted to do was that I discovered, and all I was doing as an engineer for NASA and helping other people launch to space, it's like everything we are doing in space is ultimately about improving life on Earth. And that I get goosebumps thinking about it. The motto of the International Space Station is off the Earth for the Earth. If you go to Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin site, the first thing you see across the top of the website is for the benefit of Earth. I mean, it's just embedded in everything we have done, are doing, and will be doing in space exploration. And it's one of those things, though, that I think, it's understandably can seem like it's just separate from you. It's not part of my life, but every aspect of your life is impacted positively in one way or another through what we're doing in space. You mentioned it. The assets we have in space are measuring like 80% of the vital signs of our planet that we need to understand to solve all of our greatest challenges are coming to us from space. The way we communicate, our ability to do this little chitty chat here across the interweb through spaceflight. We just did that whole went through that plague for 2 years, right? And you started to get to the point where you're walking into a place and the only way you were allowed in was when the little thermometer, the infrared thermometer, was measuring your temperature before you came in. That came to us from measuring the temperature between planets, that technology. I don't know, I could go on and on. How I'm now able to manage the osteoporosis I was going to have, whether I went to space or not, is coming back to us through what we're learning about humans in that microgravity environment. Everything we're doing is ultimately about improving life on Earth. And so it really frustrates me when I am approached with what I would assess, and I think I'm being respectful here, is like superficial understanding of something. And like, and I love the way you say it. Like, instead of coming at it with, I've seen this thing about, these people flying to space or spending their money to go to space, and I'm really confused, or trying to understand why would we be spending money on that, instead of what are all these billionaires spending their money on these joy rides to space and stuff. And I'm like, thank you, billionaires. What they could be spending their money on here on Earth could be, and I'm not going to use the words my husband does, could be a lot like worse, without any value. And yet they want to lift us off the planet. Blue Origin, his whole mission, Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin. And I encourage people, go back, look at, from when Jeff was like 5 years old. He was committed in his mind. I'm going to form a company where I make enough money. Is his commencement address, he did at his high school, where I make enough money that I can do these things in space to lift the damaging industry that's going on our planet off our planet into the benign environment of space, where I can create the Gerard O'Neillian habitats in space where the millions of people, the billions of people that are going to occupy this planet can have an alternative place to live in a healthy, Earth-like way. I mean, these are all really wonderful things. So I'm like, thank you, billionaires. And so I really, really wish people just at a kind of micro level and macro level would understand better what has been done, is going on, and what we have to look forward to from the
Well,
benefit
and I
of
think
the
it's
industry.
that self-regulation where when you feel your blood pressure going up about an issue, for me, I just pause and get curious. Like I'll just share a part of what I was in on your second seminar,
Hmm.
and I could feel my blood pressure going up with these folks that were I felt so bad for you. And with these folks that were railing at you, and somebody was going on about this. Why are we spending money in space when we've got all these needs on Earth? Blah, blah, blah. And I've become really, really fast at fact checking because of how credible and how seriously we take credibility, sourcing and citing sources at the Goodness Exchange. And so I've become very fast. And in that meeting, they were going on about this choice that we should be making. And it took me 1 second to find a litany of things that the International Space Station has allowed us to do on Earth that have saved millions and millions of lives, improved the lives, raised people out of poverty. So I really think that what I'm taking away from what you're saying is that when we feel this urge to have contempt, maybe we should just get curious and do some homework,
Yeah.
dive deeper, and ask the questions that are kind of like the opposite of what we think. Maybe ask questions. I've seen that you can do this on Chat GPT. You can actually say, here's what I think about this. Tell me some evidence to the opposite. And it is an amazing education.
Yep.
So anyway, we've taken a little sideways
Yeah,
there,
it's
but if it
great.
helps
It's great. Yeah.
if it helps people find peace of mind in this
Yeah.
world where the media landscape gets us so hyped up, I think that would be great. But I want to get to the book.
Can I
Okay.
say one other thing, Linda, about
Yeah.
this? Because I think it's really, I think money ends up being kind of where the contempt tends to come in is when people get sucked into how much money is being spent on something, right? And that can be a superficial understanding as well. I mean, I recently discovered some things that were so surprising to me. And I came across it because I was trying to understand, why is there this argument about how much money is being spent to do space, and people will say how much money is being spent in space. Well, guess what? Every single one of those dollars is spent down here on Earth. It's not spent in space anywhere. It's down here on Earth. But as an example, NASA, the budget for NASA every year is roughly $20 billion for all of what NASA does, not just spaceflight. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money, but it's not. When you look at the pie chart of all of what just the U.S. spends each year, budget wise, it's not even a line on the pie chart. It's less than 0.5% of any other thing that's going on the pie chart. And people's eyes roll in the back of their head when you start talking the numbers and all that. I get that, but something that made it like really understandable to me, and in terms of like return on investment, is $20 billion a year for NASA, all of what NASA does. Last year, $200 billion was spent on the World Cup soccer tournament. So, and I got nothing against a football game, you know, but $200 billion was spent on a soccer tournament. And right now in Saudi Arabia, they're getting ready in like the Neom complex they have, they're getting ready to support the Asian Winter Games. I think it's either in 2026 or 2029, where they already are estimating at least $600 billion to support those winter games. And I'm like, okay, fine, spend that. But don't have this like general population idea that that's okay somehow. But for, 10% of what you did for a soccer tournament, all of NASA can be contributing to life here on Earth. And so those are the kinds of things I'm trying more and more. And I welcome your daughter's help too, as a researcher, as a due diligence kind of person, is to find more and more of that and be like, okay, if we can accept this, then knowing that we could solve, as an example, that we could solve the world's energy problem with 60 to $100 billion, why are we not doing that?
I think it leads to something I'm always encouraging people to do is, just think past your knee jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's something that Liesel's taught me. Okay. We have to have at least an acknowledgement of how much there is that we haven't gotten to talk to you about today, Nicole. There is so much wonder in this book. I want to show the book again. This is something to spend your time with. That's so valuable. There's so much wonder in this book that we've decided that we're going to have a part two to this there and the rest of my questions. I mean, you got to talk to us about earthing. This is a practice that I have started doing. I'm pretty sure I'll do it the rest of my life
Yeah.
after I read about it in Nicole's book. We've got to talk about this. You were the first astronaut to paint with watercolors in space. And that's got to be, ooh, I just got goosebumps. By the
Yeah.
way, I've been keeping track of how many goosebumps I've had in this interview, and that is my sixth set of full body. And there's half goosebumps and there's full body, but that's the sixth one. I'll mark it down. I even keep track. And we've got to talk about the surprising parts of astronaut training because
Okay.
I think a lot of us have kind of a natural curiosity in these kind of things. We're going to talk about some of your most memorable moments from missions. Get your original courage. Anyway, we'll do a part two. There's so much to talk about, but I do want to hit two more questions, and one of them involves something in the book that I thought was really important. You talk about on page 49 this notion that you knew you were going to space, of course, but it didn't really hit you in here until about 20 minutes before. So talk about this
Yeah.
pivotal moment and those last 6 seconds before launch. Oh, I just got goosebumps again. Talk to us about that. You describe it in the
Yeah.
book beautifully.
Yeah, so read the book. No.
It's
But
true. It's
we,
true.
it's funny, we get out to the launch pad and all strapped in a couple hours before launch. And as a crew, we weren't really actively involved in the countdown until about that 20-minute before launch time frame. And so I think you're there and you're kind of contemplating it and you're like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to fly to space today. And you're wondering what your family's feeling while you're strapped in at this launch pad and getting ready to launch to space. And even nap. I mean, I remember like napping for a little bit, like just being so chill and ready to go. And then that 20 minutes shows up. And now as a crew, we're more actively involved with the countdown itself. And it's like, oh my gosh. And I'm looking around, I'm like, we might actually go to go to space today, because it seems so unreal. I always I like to want to say the actual doing it is very surreal, but the idea of doing it seems unreal. And so that until that point where you're like really involved and getting ready to go, and then you mentioned that last 6 seconds, the engines start and then at zero, those boosters light, and you're like wondering, were you ever on a launch pad? And, the human response to that is incredible, just the physical feeling, but this emotion of like, absolutely wasn't, you didn't plan it, but you're having to high five the person next to you and this smile and this feeling of being en route now to space. Yeah, I think it's still until it's happening or really and truly about to happen, you don't necessarily believe it's going to happen. And so
And then
pretty
there's this
intense.
moment you mentioned where where it's all light and then it's darkness and then you
Yeah.
see this thin blue line and
Yeah. You just, if you're fortunate enough to be in a place on the spacecraft where you can see out the window, it absolutely is this transition from light, even if it was, because my first launch was at nighttime, like a minute before midnight, it still felt like we had this like brightness to darkness kind of thing. This like almost immediate cut in when you were launched into space where you go from light to dark and like the blackest black you've ever seen. And then when you get the opportunity finally when the shuttle rolled and or when you were able to get out of your seat, it's like that glowing planet and that like just veil thin blue line.
wow.
Yeah, it's
It's
overwhelming. It's a bit
yeah.
overwhelming too. Yeah.
So, we're going to pause the interview here and then go to part 2 as soon as we can record again. And so lastly, I want you to leave us with from what we've talked about thus far. What do you really wish people knew? Like I've been interviewed many times myself when my book came out. Happiness is an option. How about that title? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a book about what 8 years curating the internet taught me about how we can
Well, hopefully by the
use.
next time, I'll have that
Yeah.
on my shelf as well to read.
Okay, well, it's written when our project, The Goodness Exchange, was called Ever Widening Circles, and I'm in the middle of updating it now. But what that whole adventure taught me was that our click is a vote, that we can reimagine our role with the internet and not have all this doom and gloom hanging over our head because we are the authors of our own problem. If we're walking around feeling like our knuckles are dragging, we have to look at what we are giving our attention to on the internet
Yeah.
because it's become so. I have my that I just gave you my 3 minute spiel. If I get interviewed, that's usually what the message I'm hoping people take away is that we have a choice. So if this interview had just been 3 minutes, what do you really wish people knew?
I think it goes back to your very first question or statement of the we live on a planet. And it's a simple thing. And the choice, I think this is about choice as well, because the book is meant to be a call to action in the end. And we have a choice. And I believe if we choose to accept our role as crewmates and not passengers, that we have the power to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space. And seems kind of simple. It's like choosing happiness. It seems like a simple thing, but was it Gandhi with this, be the change you wish to see in the world, the see it, be it thing. It's so true, and we have the power to accept that role and really bring it to life for everyone.
That is a great place to pause. And thank you so much, Nicole Stott, for joining us on this first half of our interview. I can't say enough about the future questions that I'm going to ask you. I know we'll just get everybody deeper and deeper and out there more and more. So if you haven't subscribed to the Goodness Exchange, please do. That really helps us keep bringing folks like Nicole to light. And if she, of course, is like so many, carrying the lantern for hope and possibility in our world, and we all need more of that. I hope the connections that Nicole and I have dropped today carry you through your week, and that you start finding all the wonder that she and I have been talking about. Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to talk to you soon.
Thank you.